Many civilizations have attempted to increase their power and influence beyond their initial borders throughout history, before eventually falling victim to the forces of time and erosion that tend to define all human efforts. Many such empires enjoyed considerable prosperity. Today, our topic of discussion is from a principality to the world's largest empire. Stay with us as we are going to reveal some great empires you might have no idea about. Number 10. The Empire of Xiongnu. At its height, the Xiongnu Empire was a prehistoric tribal confederation that covered 3.47 million square miles. Early in the 3rd century BC, a tribal leader named Manu Chanyu established the empire. The Eastern Eurasian steppe, which would eventually fall under the Mongols' control, was home to the nomadic tribes that made up the empire. The Mongolian plateau served as the center of the Xiongnu Empire, which peaked in the late 2nd century BC and ruled over a vast area that spanned from the Manchurian region of modern-day China to about the eastern edge of Central Asia. The Han Dynasty of China overthrew the empire in the 1st century AD, causing the union to break up into 2 separate states. Number 9. The Caliphate of Umayyad. At its height, the Umayyad Caliphate, which ruled over most of the Middle East and North Africa, covered 4.29 million square miles between 661 and 750. With 29% of the world's population living under its control, it was one of the greatest empires in history. Despite not having direct authority, nomadic Berber tribes paid respect to the Caliph, which allowed the Umayyad Caliphate to have a significant impact on the Sahara region. Within the greater boundaries of the Caliphate, local sultans and emirs held the authority to rule over their own territories. During its reign, the Umayyad Caliphate played a significant role in spreading Islam throughout most of West Africa and shaping Islamic culture. Number 8. The Dynasty of Yuan. In the middle to late 13th century, the enormous Mongol Empire began to disintegrate into smaller empires, giving rise to the Yuan dynasty, which ruled China. The Yuan dynasty was founded by Kublai, also known as Emperor Shizu, the 5th Khagan emperor of the Mongol Empire. At its height, the empire, which ruled over 4.25 million square miles between 1271 and 1368, included all of modern-day China, Mongolia, and the Korean Peninsula. But by the middle of the 14th century, its influence was starting to decline, and eventually the Ming dynasty took its place. Number 7. The Caliphate of Abbasid. The 3rd Islamic Caliphate to succeed Islam's founder, Prophet Muhammad, was the Abbasid Caliphate. After the Umayyad Caliphate was overthrown by the Abbasids in the middle of the 8th century, the Caliphate was founded. Islam's golden age started when the Abbasid Caliphate was in power. At its height, the Caliphate's domain covered 4.29 million square miles and spanned from the western boundary of India in the east to the coast of North Africa in what is now Algeria in the west. From the 9th century onward, the Abbasids governed for centuries, their influence gradually dwindling until it was finally eradicated in the early 16th century. Number 6. The French Colonial Empire II. At its height of dominance, the Second French Colonial Empire encompassed 4.44 million square miles of colonies and dependencies, making it one of the largest in history. The First French Colonial Empire gave way to the empire in the early to mid-19th century. Similar to the United Kingdom, France formerly possessed numerous colonies across the globe. Smaller colonies might be found across the Americas, the Caribbean, and the South Pacific, but its main holdings were in Africa. Following World War II, the majority of these regions were given autonomy or independence from France, as well as their own governments and currencies. The remains of this enormous empire are currently dispersed over a total area of roughly 47,548 square miles across islands in the Atlantic, Pacific, Indian, and Southern Oceans, as well as a region on the South American continent. It seems like you're still there, so do subscribe and hit the bell icon. Number 5. The Empire of Spain. One of the strongest and longest-lasting colonial empires in recorded history was the Spanish Empire. Following Portugal and Spain's leadership throughout the European Age of Discovery, it quickly rose to prominence as a significant global superpower. At its height in the late 1700s, the Spanish Empire covered an area of around 5.29 million square miles and spanned nearly 5 centuries, 1492 to 1976. Spanish colonies were dispersed over the Caribbean, North and South America, and other regions. The empire had a significant impact on world politics, economy, trade, and culture. The Spanish Empire ruled over most of Europe, Latin America, and North Africa, with great military and economic might at its height. Its influence is still felt today. For instance, Spanish law, language, and architecture have been incorporated into numerous countries in these regions. Even though the Spanish Empire was finally destroyed in 1976, it is still regarded as one of the most remarkable and long-lasting empires in history. Number 4. The Dynasty of Qing. China's territory was expanded under the Qing dynasty, which is renowned for its valiant military campaigns. Between 1750 and 1790, under the Qianlong Emperor, China's frontiers were extended to encompass 5.68 million square miles of territory. This covered a substantial portion of Inner Asia that was either under foreign rule or had formerly been autonomous, as well as Tibet, Hainan, and Taiwan. The Qing became one of the most powerful imperial dynasties in history as a result of their massive conquests, which extended their dominion over an estimated 450 million people. Early Qing times were characterized by relative stability, as population growth boosted agricultural productivity, commerce, and cultural activities. But eventually, this wealth would bring about its demise. There was not enough farming or work prospects due to the large population, which resulted in widespread poverty. The instability of the dynasty was threatened by anti-Qing uprisings, which sprang out of this dissatisfaction. However, the military might and expansion of the Qing dynasty will always be remembered in Chinese history. Number 3. Russian Empire. Between the years 1721 and 1917, the Russian Empire was a massive political entity that exercised dominance over significant portions of Eurasia. In 1895, it reached its maximum size, measuring 8.8 million maitu at its widest point. During this time period, the Russian Empire rose to prominence as a major force in Europe and was instrumental in putting a stop to Napoleon's plans to dominate the continent. There were 125.6 million people living under its authority, and they represented a wide variety of geographies, faiths, dialects, and cultural traditions. It was on November 2, 1721 that the Russian Senate bestowed the title of Emperor upon Peter the Great, also known as Peter I, which ultimately led to the formation of the Russian Empire. As quickly as possible, the emperor launched an ambitious campaign to capture regions all over the world. At its height, the Russian Empire's borders extended from the northern coast of Asia to the borders of what is now Afghanistan and Iran, as well as from the Bering Sea in the east to the eastern border of Germany in the west. In other words, they spanned the whole continent of Asia. Even though it no longer controls the territory it once did in Central Asia, the Caucasus, and some of Eastern Europe, the Russian Federation nevertheless controls a significant portion of what used to be the Russian Empire's landmass. This is the case with regard to the Russian Federation's possession of a large portion of the former Russian Empire's territory. Number 2. The Empire of the Mongols. The Mongol Empire was one of the greatest empires in history, covering an area of around 9.27 million maitu across the continent of Eurasia. Between the years 1206 and 1368, the empire was at its height, and it had a significant impact on the course of history. In the early 13th century, the unification of the many Mongol tribes under the leadership of Genghis Khan marked the beginning of the Mongol Empire. In the space of around half a century, the empire came to govern a sizable portion of Eastern Europe in addition to a significant portion of Central Asia and China. When it was at its greatest extent in the middle to late 13th century, the Mongol Empire encompassed a territory that extended from the Sea of Japan to Western Asia Minor, also known as Anatolia or modern-day Turkey. In spite of his affluence, the death of Genghis Khan in 1227 set in action events that would ultimately lead to the collapse of the empire. Today, the Mongol Empire is remembered not only for its ruthless military strategies, but also for its achievements in bringing together a variety of cultural traditions and promoting commercial activity across its territory. Number 1. The British Empire. The British Empire had a significant bearing on the development of nations and cultures all across the world. Its legacy is still palpable in many facets of modern life, including culture, language, and even international affairs. It was established over the course of several centuries through the processes of colonialism, war, and trade, with the majority of its growth occurring during the 19th century. It was by far the largest empire in history, both in terms of population and territory. At its height, it encompassed an estimated 13.71 million square miles, which is equivalent to approximately 1/4 of the total land area of the Earth. People used to say things like the sun never sets on the British Empire because the British Empire comprised colonies all over the world. This was the reason for the saying. In spite of this, British imperialism began to decline after World War II, and as a result, the United Kingdom was compelled to relinquish the majority of its colonial possessions. The legacy of the British Empire continues to have an impact on contemporary events, with the United Kingdom ranking as one of the most influential nations in the world. That's pretty much enough for today. Let us know your favorite part of the video. Subscribe to get the latest updates.